here. Now we are recording. Now I'm going to share screen. Okay. All right. So Heather and Ellen and Drew and Sarah and Dustin, thanks for joining me with this. If you notice in the course site, it talks about lectures and lecture from your professor and so on. That's never really been particularly my style, so it's not exactly how I wanted to do things. There are, maybe you notice, maybe you don't, there are, I believe, 10 sections of school law that are working right now. And so I am one of 3 or 4 people that are facilitating this course. And I wanted to have a way to have a conversation, or at least instead of me simply reading the notes and that kind of stuff. Again, that is far from my style. When I teach my undergrad students, I try to talk about the concept that we really don't teach our undergrad kids how to lecture much anymore. And so that's really not what we do. We talk a lot more about student engagement, stuff like that. So what my intent is that we'll have this conversation about attendance, which is the module 3, and then it'll last as long as it lasts. There's no set time to it particularly. And then I will upload this back up into the course site for everybody to see. And it's a way for me to talk about the concepts from this course, in this instance on July 11th on 2021, and to talk about this. But maybe no, maybe don't. No, it didn't really matter. But I was a secondary school administrator for 19 years. So after being an administrator principal, I went and worked at DESE. Those of you, if you're not from Missouri, that's Missouri's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I worked for DESE for almost 3 years. And then I just finished my year number 10 at Northwest, which makes me one of the more senior folks in Brown Hall and Northwest at the moment. So so my angle is as I talk about this, I'm going to try to keep coming back to what I saw, what I learned as a school administrator on these concepts. Again, I'm not going to read much. I'm not going to, yeah, it's just way too boring. So a little bit of housekeeping. You may know that you've seen some emails from me. When I was given this course to teach, how it works is that there's a professor that is, I call the keeper of the curriculum for the courses. In this case, it's Dr. Alexander. She keeps the flame for school law. So when she asked me to teach this class, she loaded over, she gave me access to the information for me to roll it into my Canvas site, and then I put my flavor on it and so on. I'm not changing a lot from how she has it written, because this is the first time I've taught school law for Northwest. I've taught it for 2 other universities before I joined Northwest. So I was able to roll over information into our Canvas sites, section 92 and 93, and I was working with it. And then some of our friends in the technology office said, well, hey, Dr. Gordon needs that information, so we're going to roll it over there. And so it worked out that all the information got duplicated, and I've been fighting it ever since. So module 3 in section 92, if you come in from the module version and look at it, you may not see the assignments, but when I go into student view, I can see those assignments. Now in module, when section 93, it looks the way I want it to. I have no idea, and I couldn't fix it the last couple of days as I was working on it. And I'm a little bit concerned that the more I mess with things, the worse it gets. So a basic concept is that we will never take off points for any technology issues, especially if it's a technology issue that I did. So if you have questions about any assignments, and I know something in module 2, there was 2 places in the grade book, and I can't fix that without making a bigger mess of it. So we'll get it all fixed out, and nobody's grade will suffer from any of all that. And I'll just Dr. Fott and I will fix that from on the back end. So when you talk about attendance, some concepts that I wanted to share. I have to be careful not to get too Missouri specific about our concepts, because, and you all know this, that there's people from all over the United States and international that are in our courses. And so really the concept is of compulsory school attendance, and parts of that are in the news right now. Parents are talking about, and I'm not going to get into all this, about things that are they don't agree with are being taught in schools, or they agree with, and whether they are pulling students in or out of public schools. But really, this concept is compulsory. And as a high school principal, I dealt with this for generally underclassmen students. By the time they got to be juniors and seniors, it was not quite as much of an issue. So as on the sharing here, click the video below to watch the online lecture. That's where I'm going to put, if I get done, that's where I'm going to put the video. So one impact that I talk about when it comes to dropping out. For a while at DESE, I helped facilitate trainings statewide with the National Dropout Prevention Center, specifically the National Dropout Prevention Center for students with disabilities, because my funding for a lot of time that I was at DESE was through the special education world. And so we had a lot of conversations, a lot of trainings that we helped facilitate. And I was the liaison between DESE and the state and folks from the Dropout Prevention Center. I think they're in Georgia. And so I would help troop them around the state and organize and that kind of stuff. So a real reason that I wanted to share this bit right here, a big part of the impact that, if I make things go the way I want them to, this information here talks about why students drop out of school, which is a direct correlation to attendance, because this data is just a touch dated as 2006, but it talks about missing too many days of school as a heavy correlate for reasons why students drop out of school. And when you look at data like this, the thing that always helped us see that rarely do students drop out of school because they cannot handle the curricular content. There's lists of all the reasons here that are frequency and correlates that all pile together to get in the way of students graduating from high school. And down at the bottom here, it talks about push, pull, or falling out factors. As one thing I'll encourage you as prospective administrators, as you're putting policies together and how you're working with students, try to look for places that help, that maybe facilitate students getting behind the curve when it comes to finishing school. For example, some schools, in my school for a while, if a student got in trouble and got suspended, then they took a 0 for any of the homework that they missed while they were suspended. And I was never comfortable with that. That to me felt like it was double punishment. And so students that get suspended from school, rightfully, maybe they got in a fight or something like that, needed to be suspended, or they assaulted somebody, they needed to be removed from the environment. But if they were also receiving 0s for the homework while they were gone, then odds were they're going to fail other classes too, which only made things worse. So I tended to be, in the policies that I wrote, I tended to try to build in ways for students to recover the work. Now it required their effort and their sweat equity. But I always wanted to have a way for students to earn their credit back. And so that, in my mind, having students receive a 0 for homework that they missed while they're suspended is an example of pushing students out of the building when that was not really your intent. I always contended that students that were violent and severely disruptive, disrespectful, they didn't necessarily need to walk the halls of comprehensive high school during that time, because I also felt those students sometimes, and I've had a hard time finding data for this, but those disruptive, violent students pushed other kids out of school, because a lot of kids didn't want to sit in the classroom beside somebody that they knew was violent. And so I was not opposed to suspending a student that was violent, but generally only for reasons like that: drugs, weapons, violence. Tried real hard not to suspend any students for non-violent infractions. If kids get in trouble and receive a little detention, something like that, if they don't show up for the detention or refuse to serve the detention, I tried real hard not to have that detention to turn into an out-of-school suspension. Wasn't always perfect about that, but students in the policies I put together had to really work at it to end up being suspended for non-violent infractions. And so, because that was just one of my beliefs, that people that are violent, that's one thing. If they were just missing their homework and getting into the discipline chain, one way or another, missing homework, teacher assigns the detention, student doesn't do the detention, that flows for a while, then the teacher ends up referring them to the assistant principals, and the student gets into the discipline chain for not doing their homework. Never made sense to me to suspend them. Tried to use in-school suspension, tried to use anything I could other than out-of-school suspension. So I wanted to, that's an example of some information on it. And what I've done, I've just cut my notes or things I wanted to remember, I wanted to talk about into here, and they will be in the course site. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to do official APA citing, that kind of stuff. It's more like where I obtained the information as I wanted to talk about it. Athletics, I don't really want to get into that so much tonight. A recurring issue that I had as a principal was when students, and one of our local policies was the students had to be in school on the day of and the day after extracurricular activities all day. And once in a while we would run into issues that basically we didn't want students to have a big basketball game one night and then sleep in and miss a bunch of classes the next day. That's a really bad look. So some of the litigation, I'm just going to scroll down and I'll say to Lena, Heather, Ellen, any of you, feel free to chime in and ask me a question. But I'm just going to flow. And again, I'm going to keep trying to come back to experiences that I have seen that are around this issue of school attendance. So a big fight right now, this bit right here, if you watch the news, this is a fight right now as to who gets to really say the content that is delivered in the classroom. And there are some parents that are pushing that issue right now. And so we'll flow more, we'll get into it some more. My take is that schools need to work extra hard to listen to what the parents want during difficult times. This time of COVID and the pandemics and the lockdowns have shown us how difficult all this is. And there are parents that want their students to be masked. There are parents who want their child to have the vaccine shot. And there are parents that are just as adamant against that, whether a third grader needs a vaccine or not. In my opinion, schools need to listen very carefully during really trying times. And it's hard because I've thought about that. One thing you could do is set up listening posts and have these big meetings and in the gymnasium where you get information from people and listen to parents. Sometimes those things can turn difficult. And I'm aware that it takes a lot of gumption for an administrator or a school board member to be on the receiving end of that. And school board members aren't paid enough to do that, but it also comes with the territory. Now, this morning, how is the school system structured in Germany? The reason that I brought that here is that, again, talking about parental rights around education, and a big conversation we have in Missouri and statewide, well, nationwide, is the concept of homeschooling, and that parents are able to rather liberally in the state of Missouri homeschool. And I'm not getting into whether that's a good thing or bad thing. As a principal, I just said, well, it just is what it is. But I was listening to the radio this morning. They were talking about something like this at some random talk show, and I was not aware because they were kind of comparing, contrasting countries a little bit. And this person reminded the speakers that in the country of Germany, there is no homeschool. And I didn't know that. And that he said, and this person said that in Germany, when the students are 6 years old, if they're not in school, a government official comes to your door and forces the issue. And that is not how it is generally in Missouri or other states. And that's just not how we do things. So it's interesting, the vast different ways that this is handled across the world. Now, Missouri's compulsory attendance law, there's the link here that you can look at this more. I'm not about to read to you this kind of stuff, but it's interesting when you look down here. But 17 years of age. There were times when I was a principal that I wondered about the concept of a compulsory attendance for a student at that age. If they just don't want to be there and they're going to be disruptive and violent and so on, and any high school principal will say that they've dealt with some of that. That becomes difficult when a student is almost at the age where they don't have to attend anymore. And you know they need the education, you know they need to be there, but they're going to be a disruption. It becomes a tough conversation for school leaders. That's a whole different matter when their ages 5 or 6 or something like that. And my wife is a retired special education teacher, and there are times when she would force the issue to help get her students, to get the parents to have their students come to school. And in some schools, and we know this, you can make hotline calls for parents that are not getting their children to school, and you can do all that stuff. And anybody that's been in the business very long has done that where you make the hotline call about lack of attendance. But you know that that's only the tip of the iceberg of the issues that are going on in that household that lead towards their kids not coming to school. My wife was looking at doing some Google searches just the other day about some students that she taught 20 years ago that were difficult, and she knew that their home lives are difficult, and name after name, they were in prison, they involved in crime, really difficult stuff. So we know that just hotline a parent to get their 6-year-old to school is what we do, but may or may not really solve the whole issue. So the exemptions to the compulsory attendance law. Did you know in Missouri, if a student becomes married, they're excluded from the compulsory attendance law? I find that an interesting concept. So I'm going to scroll down here. Missouri is rather permissive of compulsory part-time attendance and so on. Different states do it differently. I have this from Missouri, from DESE, as a way to drive the conversation. Not if you're in Iowa or Kansas, these things are all a little different from different states. As you know, really bottom line, education is a function of the individual state. That other than really controlling some purse strings, the federal government doesn't have as much say over direct what's going on in schools than some people think. Roughly, in a special education world, food service, things like that, they do. There are ways that money flows, but it tends to be a small part of the school's budget. In this course, we will spend some time talking about special education law. And in my opinion, they control more through litigation than they do through the purse string. So I'm going to keep scrolling down here. In the state of Missouri, the ADA, or average daily attendance, is really the carrot that makes school leaders really focus on the attendance. And it's very important for schools to be very accurate with this and to have very accurate records, because I was helping to facilitate a dropout prevention training in a big city on the east side of the state of Missouri. And the superintendent asked me, what's the first thing that they can do to improve their dropout data? And I said, well, the first thing you have to do is make sure your data is accurate. You need to know who's attending your schools, where they are, because one high school may want to call one student dropout, but the student may be attending school across town, and central office doesn't know that. And so it's important that schools are very accurate with ADA for aid, and also to be accurate to the community as to their data when it comes to for students that drop out of school. So I'll just keep scrolling down here and see. There's a concept here that I wanted to talk about, that I learned this stuff the hard way. In my first principalship, we had a lot of information in the student handbook about excused and unexcused absences. And the handbook tried to have good exemplars for excused and unexcused. But anybody that's administrated very long, you find out that there's always gray areas. And about every day, I would have a couple notes from students that are coming back to school, they missed the day before, notes from parents, and I had to decide whether it's going to be excused or unexcused, or excused or unexcused. And the pressure on that was pretty profound, because technically, if they had an unexcused absence in that policy at the time, students were not able to do the work that they missed. And if they missed a test or a final or something like that, it was catastrophic. So it tended to put me into a lot of conflict. And so later policies that I would write and recommend to the school board, I tended to start to write, soften that language to unexcused was more like truant, and where they were absent without their parental knowledge, things like that. So most of the time, if parents would sign off on their son or daughter missing school, I didn't fight it very much. If the parents knew where they were, I tried to avoid that. I tried to avoid that fight. Wasn't always perfect. I guess I was saying that by the time I'd been a principal for 13, 14, 15 years, I learned how to try to pick my battles and sidestep things that if I could, I would. And I'm not trying to avoid it, but there's plenty of conflict. But if a parent said, well, opening day of deer season, my son hasn't missed a day of school all year long, dad's going to take son deer hunting. In outstate rural Missouri, it happens all the time. And if a principal wants to fight that, you will get bowled over. And so you just okay. And you go with the flow with that. So try to get myself in a position where I wasn't making judgment calls if the parents knew where their son or daughter was. And I might disagree sometimes. There were times we'd have in the high school setting, we have a senior skip day or something like that. And really aggravating. And some parents would lie. And some parents would say, no, I knew where my son was and I supervised it and he hasn't missed a day all year. And I just go, well, okay. And just go with the flow. So other things in here, these excused, unexcused. I'm happy here for the concept of conversation. As a principal, you want to try to stay away of, if you can, of questioning when parents write that son or daughter was ill. Try to, best you can, just accept that. If you want to lose the battle, start insisting on a doctor's note. In my opinion, legally, you're on thin ice if you start demanding doctor's notes. Because that, medical information is technically confidential. The same way, if you have faculty members or teachers that are missing, you can't demand a doctor's note. You'll get yourself in trouble with that. The same way with religious holidays and that kind of stuff. Religious holidays, just be very, very careful, any of that kind of stuff. Now, I've worked in districts that have had a large population of Amish families. And in that community, I don't know if you know this or not, that they don't tend to send their students to high school. And I just included this here. This case, Wisconsin versus Yoder, was the case back in 72, where basically the court said that it was up to the Amish community if they chose not to send their students to school, on to high school. That was a local decision, and that the school district didn't have to fight that. And so really, this is an example of something, how I'm handling school law here differently than how I was taught the first time I had a school law class a long time ago. I'll get right to you, Heather. The first time I took a school law class, basically we were taught from a law book, and we spent all our time talking about case law, and the tests were, tell what happened in Wisconsin versus Yoder. Tell what happened in Plessy Ferguson. Tell what happened in Brown Topeka. Tell what happened in blah 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 blah. And Tinker Des Moines. We'll come back to Tinker Des Moines because I kind of like that one anyway. But I try not to teach it that way. We're trying to talk more contextual. Heather, you have a question?
So you talked about gray area in requiring students to have doctor's notes for absences. But I know that our school requires documentation for them to still participate in athletics or extracurriculars. And I want to say that they say that's due to MSHA law. So how do we as administrators kind of deal with that aspect of it, of the MSHA requirements versus the legality of all these things?
Boy, I would want to go back and double check on whether that is actually a MSHA expectation. Because I was a secondary principal and I served on some MSHA committees. To the best of my knowledge, I don't remember that ever coming from MSHA. Okay, those of you not in Missouri, MSHA is the Missouri State High School Activities Association. MSHA.
It may be that that's just how our school kind of has chosen to operate in our handbook. But I was just curious about that. I guess I would need to kind of go back and look at our handbook and see what our rules are.
Well, Heather, I will tell you this. schools do all kinds of things until somebody takes them to court. Okay.
Right.
Now,
Right.
to the best of my knowledge, MISHA, it was a MISHA expectation that students attended school on the day of an activity. I mean, there were some fine lines in there. MISHA did dive into that one. I don't remember MISHA getting into whether there was a doctor's note or not. My take is that that anybody expected anybody else to provide a doctor's note. In my opinion, you're starting to get over into FERPA issues.
Yeah.
FERPA is Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act.
Right.
And so I tried real hard not to have any of that in policies. I was never comfortable with that. And again, schools will have all kinds of things in policy and do all kinds of things until somebody, and the community doesn't, I mean, the community is fine. Communities may be fine with it until somebody, raises a stink. And probably a good example is how schools handle holiday festivals and holiday events and that kind of stuff. Some schools, they probably call them Christmas, and they're heavily Judeo-Christian, and lots of religion in it, and in their communities, nobody bats an eye. And the communities where I was principal, somebody would bat an eye because the district was much more diverse than that, and so our holiday festivals were holiday festivals, and the music at the concerts, the vocal music teacher would have a wide range of, it was religious based, but it was from lots of different religions. So because in our town, somebody would have taken us to task over it. So I guess what I'm saying is that when you become a principal, one, you try not to overhaul a student handbook any more than you have to. I learned two, I tried to keep it as concise as possible and not to try to expect it to cover every single angle that could possibly come up, because you never will. Try to write enough latitude in it that it was easy to administer. Generally, the best policies and procedures take the least amount of administrative handling. You'll see what I mean someday. So the attendance, if you lean more on parents knowing where their son and daughter was, then you don't fight that fight. I mean, that's how I chose to handle it. I didn't fight it as much. Now it's different when they were truant, and then there were consequences for that, and so on. That's a different matter. But you make changes to your student handbook incrementally. Kind of getting off the task a little bit. Heather, did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm gonna keep flowing. I'm getting towards the bottom of this thing here. Immunizations, folks, I'm not going there. That is a mess right now, and that's not right. Not a right way to put it. There is a lot in the news about immunizations and whether small children should, it's best, whether they should have the recent round of immunizations or not. I don't have a good answer for that one. Don't have a good answer for that one. Let's see. My daughter is a second grade teacher, and she deals with this firsthand on a regular basis. Anyway, I'm going to go on down here. Okay, there are some other links down here you can go to. I don't know if I want to get into all that. I've been gabbing here for almost 40 minutes, which is about as long as I wanted to do this. This topic, as far as it goes with school law topics, has relevance, but it doesn't have, as, in my opinion, as much meat for principals to talk about. And when we get into things like students' First Amendment issues or Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues, things like special education, provokes a lot more conversation than a student attendance. I know that those of you that work in the younger grades face this issue with making decisions as to whether you want to hotline a parent for lack of child attendance or not. That's rather contentious. If you've ever been involved in hotlining parents, well, I'll rephrase that. If you haven't been involved in that, you will be. Anybody who's works in this world knows how difficult that is and how traumatic that is. And you hotline a parent, sometimes it doesn't make things any better. You know you have to do it, but there's no guarantee, there's no magic bullet to it. Actually, my wife and I were talking about some of the boys, tend to be boys, that she worked with, had horrible home lives. And we bought coats for kids, we bought bikes for kids. Once or twice, we even paid electric bills, and out of our own pockets. That's kind of what teachers do. School supplies, but we knew that their home life was bad, and we couldn't really fix that. We felt like we had to try. So my intent, see how this flows, is to do one of these conversations. Maybe I need to change my background instead of the Bearcat paw to a fireplace, call it a fireside chat. That's a bit presumptuous. But I'll probably do another one of these next Sunday and just let it flow from that. I'll pause here and see if anybody has any questions. And if not, I'll thank you for being my guinea pigs too, because I thought about just making a video, and I can do that, of course. It gets a little boring. It's a little bit more interesting, and we'll just see how it flows for the rest of the course. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, that's called wait time. So, all right, thank you. Hello, Dr. Flott. I see you there. Let's see. Do you have any words of wisdom for us, Dr. Flott?
Yeah, after 36 years, don't fight midgets. Hey, the little things will wear you out.
Yeah.
Just do what's best for each individual student in each situation, and you'll be fine. Yeah. But a lot of times I know administrators that really struggle, that they'll worry about the little things and they'll let the big things go. And just use common sense and try to keep as much of that off your plate as you can.
Oh my God, yes. I think back to some of the stuff that I did my first few years as principal, the battles I chose to fight, and I drove myself crazy, conflict all the time. Well, my favorite fight was not letting students wear hats in school. Mm-hmm. And that was a policy, yes, but man, I was over the board about that. And I fought that, and it said not in school, and even in the handbook it mentioned it at extracurricular activities in the building. So I found myself fighting hats in school at home basketball games. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, why in the world was I doing that? So I like, Brad, I like your concept there of picking your battle, and there will be plenty conflict on your plate that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And just because you know we know this, being a principal is exhausting. And anyway, okay, all right. I will stop share. I will end this meeting if there's no more questions or comments. Okay, thank you. Good evening. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.